So what is a real estate syndication and how do we get them structured? So a real estate syndication is a partnership between investors and the operators. And the operators are bringing their skill and partnering that with the investors' capital. And they come together to go take down larger deals than they would be able to take down individually, right? So like most people are able to buy a single family home by themselves. But when you're talking about a $10 million asset or a $20 million asset, you want to go buy that as a team of people. And you do that through a real estate syndication. And in that real estate syndication, you're going to have limited partners, which are your investors, and they're limited partners because they're going to have limited liability. And then those partners are going to be bought into an LLC, a limited liability company, which would then own the entity, would own the real estate. And then you'd have the limited partners who would be a partner in that real estate, and then the general partners who would be a partner in that real estate. And all these business entities provide liability protection for both the investors and the managers.
And then, so what is this syndication, right? You can sort of think of it as owning a security, right? A stock or a bond, as it is an investment vehicle. But unlike stocks and bonds, you cannot sell in and sell out or buy in essentially whenever you want, right? You have one point in time to buy in, and then you hold it for the period of the actual investment, the entire hold period. Typically, securities are actually required to be registered with the SEC, which tends to be a very costly and time-consuming process. Luckily for us, these real estate transactions are actually exempt, and they take advantage of an exemption known as a Regulation D or Reg D exemption. This is an exemption where, under certain, situations, these Reg D offerings can be offered as private placement investments, but they have to meet a couple of hurdles here that we're going to talk about on this next slide, right? So, in order to be exempt, you have to fall under the following categories: either a 506B type offering or a 506C type offering. 506C type offerings are only offered to accredited investors, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means on the next slide. But just keep in mind the 506Cs can only be offered to accredited investors, and for 506Cs, you can advertise these however you want. You can do it on social media. You can call people up. You can put them in print ads. However you want to advertise them, to email lists. Any of that stuff is all legal. 506Bs are a little bit different, right? So 506Bs, advertising not permitted. You can't go and post this thing on social media for a 506B offering. You can't go and put it on your YouTube channel. On the flip side, though, you are allowed to take in some non-accredited investors that do happen to be sophisticated investors, up to 35 of them. And then, those are investors that you have to have built up a pre-existing substantive relationship. And what that means is it's got to be, more than just meeting them once, right? It's got to be an actual relationship that you've tracked and have built up over time. And it falls on the sponsor's shoulders to document and make sure that you can prove that relationship and that is legit. That's just a requirement of being able to do this 506B type offering. So those are kind of the two choices for meeting that Reg D exemption. So every time we want to do this, we want to pick one of these two options, because the thing we don't want to do is have to register this offering with the SEC. Oh, and then there is, to confirm accredited investors, there's a service called Verify Investor. And typically, to get accredited investors documented, you'd have to send them to a link you'd set up with Verify Investor, and then it would ask a couple of questions and have them potentially submit documents just to make sure that your accredited investors are also verified and registered.
Yeah. And the documents that they would require you to submit are your tax returns or a letter from their accountant. the accredited investor's accountant to prove that they were an accredited investor. And we're going to get into what an accredited investor is in the next slide. So an accredited investor, what is an accredited investor? So an accredited investor is someone that individually makes $200,000 or more annually in the last 2 years, right? So you can also be an accredited investor if you and your wife or you and your spouse make $300,000 over the last 2 years, right? Or you could also have a net worth of over $1 million. So that's an accredited investor. So these offerings like the 506B and the 506C they only used to have 506Cs, which were only for accredited investors. But sophisticated investors got really upset about that because they were like, the accredited investors are getting all of these really good deals. Like, we want to be a part of these deals. Yeah, I know we don't make $200,000 a year. I know me and my significant other don't make $300,000 a year. And yeah, I don't make $1 million. I don't have a net worth of $1 million, but I'm still sophisticated. I understand how to underwrite these deals. I understand, like, this is a good investment, and I want to put the money that I have in that investment. I don't want to be locked out of those investments. And then that's when the SEC came up with this 506B offering, and they created this term for a sophisticated non-accredited investor. And a sophisticated non-accredited investor is an investor that doesn't meet the qualifications for an accredited investor. So they don't make $200,000 a year. Them and their spouse do not make $300,000 a year, or they do not have a net worth over $1 million. But what they do have is they have knowledge about the investment. They've done their homework, they've done their research, and that makes you a sophisticated investor.
And then something else worth mentioning is kind of for those sophisticated investors and for the 506B type offerings, just a general rule of thumb on, what does kind of meet the qualifications of a pre-existing relationship is a 3-touch kind of a rule, right? So you want to have at least kind of 3 substantial interactions with that investor and be able to kind of document those interactions. So that's not really a legal rule, but that's just kind of a generally accepted principle, is that 3-touch rule.
Right. So you want to document your time when you're going to these meetups, right? Because not everybody's an accredited investor. You're going to meet more sophisticated investors than you do meet accredited investors, especially so when you're going to these meetups, you want to document, okay, I was at this meetup and I met person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, person 5. You shoot them an email, right? So there's your documentation. Hey, it was great meeting with you. We have an investment in Atlanta that's happening. We have an investment in San Antonio that's happening. I'd love to, catch up with you later and walk through this investment with you and see if it's something that'll be a good fit for you, right? So that's 1 touch, right? And then you meet them again at another meetup, and then you meet them again at another meetup. So you have 3 touches, and after each one of those meetups, you're sending them emails, you're touching them, right? And then you could use that as documentation to the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to kind of circle back here again on the structure, right? So the property, right, would be owned by that entity, the LLC or the limited partnership. And then, making up the limited partners is this set of either 506C accredited investors or 506B with some accredited and up to 35 sophisticated investors. So that's kind of where they fit in the grand scheme of things. They make up that limited partner group of investors.
And to also add to that, right? So the limited partners are bringing capital to the table. They're limited partners, meaning they also have limited liability, right? The general partner is the operator of the deal, right? And the limited partner gets to receive the cash flow that the general partner creates. The limited partner gets to get the equity appreciation that the general partner will create, right? But at the same time, the general partner gets the capital that the limited partners are bringing to the table. So it's not, these are bigger deals that we're going after. So you need to have a marriage between the general partner and the limited partner. People with money and people with talent and skill, and have a good understanding of picking out properties and operating those properties to drive profits for the property for both themselves and the investor, right?